Welcome, guys. I'm Mark Lewis from Crewmojo, and today I've got Caitlin and Nicole joining us from Mantel Group, who have kindly agreed to go into a bit of a deep dive on the way they handle performance in their organization. That said, I'm also aware that performance is not a word that's used, so we're going to explore a little bit about that from the context of Mantel Group. So maybe introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of a background on Mantel Group and what you do.
Sure. Well, hi everyone. I'm Nicole. I look after talent experience here at Mantel Group, which we essentially define as initial contact through to day 28. So all things recruitment and onboarding sit in my bucket. Having said that, I have a background in HR and business partnering. So I also look after or work with Caitlin to look after feedback here at Mantel Group as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. My name's Caitlin. I'm in the people and culture team at Mantel Group. I currently partner with a couple of our awesome brands. And yeah, since I joined Mantel Group, one of the first projects I got stuck into was helping Nick and the team with the Crewmojo implementation. So it's kind of become our baby a little bit now. And it's been really awesome to bring the team on the journey as well.
Nicole, maybe tell me a little bit about the organization. I know you've got some specifics around the company being made up of lots of different brands. Tell me how that comes together.
Yeah, so we're an Australian-owned tech consulting company based in Australia. We also have employees in New Zealand, and our structure is we're a house of brands. So we have a number of brands that work in different areas of IT across data, security, cloud, and digital. And our real focus is to make things better for our clients and improve their technology experience.
And I also understand you've got quite a focus on people and culture because you've managed as an organization to win some pretty special awards in that space. Maybe share some of those achievements.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to start with Mantel Group very early days. So when I started in 2018, so we were formed in 2017. When I started in 2018, we were probably only about 30 or 40 people. Our founders who are still here today, part of the strategy was culture and people first, and that has not shifted from day one. So they wanted to create something where be a consulting company, but have a bit of a different edge, which had a really, really supportive culture. So our culture is a principles-based culture. And honestly, everything we do comes back to that. And feedback is definitely key to that. So we sort of have very limited policies and processes, and we really rely. So we live and breathe our principles. And, part of people coming on board and part of our recruitment as well is hiring people that can work in this structure and this environment, and that we can trust, because our culture is all built on based on trusting each other to live and breathe those principles.
So it sounds like when you have considered your approach to performance or your approach to feedback, that's very much been tied into the values of the organization. Tell me how you managed to connect that approach to performance or feedback with the values and make it something that's very meaningful at a day-to-day level.
Yeah, so we don't do what traditional organizations do in terms of the standard performance review approach. So we actually don't do performance reviews. We don't even use the word performance. When we hire people in, we actually expect them to be high performing. So all our team we see as talent, and we hold each other to those expectations. So when we developed our feedback process, again, we started with our principles. So how would this work? So things like communicate directly. It is absolutely everyone's responsibility to give each other feedback. And we went back to what's the purpose of feedback? What's the purpose of performance reviews? And those kind of processes that we don't have. And it all came back to us to be around helping each other learn and grow.
And how do those principles connect in with the overall strategy of the group?
I mean, our strategy is to be, the strategic technology and delivery partner of choice for organisations across Australia and New Zealand. And to be able to do that, we have to have the best tech talent working with us and bring out the best in them. So with that, needs to have a great culture where people need to love what they do, one of our principles, and be awesome at it. And to help them do that, we need to give each other feedback and communicate directly. As I said, it's as simple as helping each other learn and grow.
It's awesome. Keeping it simple is often the best way. It makes it easy for people to understand and to do. What were some of the principles? So we've got the sort of the values that you were bringing in, but what were some of the principles that guided your approach to how you rolled out feedback so that people could adopt the process?
So we treat people as adults is probably a big one for that, and that falls into make good choices, one of our principles. So we made the decision that we're not driving feedback as an organisation. Individuals are driving feedback for themselves. So they lead their feedback. We give, again, without having a heap of policies and processes, we don't give structured guidance on when people ask for feedback. We get them to make good choices. We give them some suggestions, at the end of a project would make logical sense to ask for feedback during probation. So there's alignment, those kind of logical things. But it's your feedback is yours to own and drive. You're not measured on it. We don't rate you on it. It is for you to learn and grow. So the only way we think we can get buy-in, and what seems to work for us, is that it's someone's feedback which they own. And we've just put some structures in place around that. So everyone has a people guide, sort of like a careers coach that helps support them through the feedback. We only ask a very small number of questions with our feedback. Again, keep it simple is another one you'll probably hear us say a lot. There's only 3 questions.
Can you share what those questions are?
I can jump in. So the first one is, what am I doing well? And what we've sort of done is align the way the question's structured so that it aligns to Mantel Group's attributes and principles. So it's up to people how they actually want to interact with that question. If they just want to type out, a free text answer of what the person's doing well, they can do that. Or if they need a little bit of a prompt, or they want to sort of tie it in and give a specific example that relates to one of the principles or one of our attributes, they can do that as well using the tick boxes. So what am I doing well is the first question. What could I do more or better of is the second question. And then we've just got a bit of a general catch-all. Is there anything else you wanted to add? And often people use that to sort of give suggestions. If they've given them some constructive feedback to work on, they might actually use that to say, here's how I think you could, engage in that area, or, how you might like to consider developing that particular area further.
Awesome. And is it the same set of attributes for both of those first 2 questions? What am I doing well, and what could I improve on?
Yeah, it is. So we've got our 5 principles, and then we've kind of got our subset of Mantel Group attributes, which I guess they're sort of the non-technical attributes that sit across every role at Mantel Group. Mm-hmm. So we expect that everyone has the ability to use good judgment, influential leadership, rapport and empathy. There's a few sort of key attributes within our framework that apply to every role, regardless of whether you're, in an operational role, if you're a consultant, Nick and myself, these attributes really, really apply to everyone. So it's a really good way to kind of bring it back to those in terms of the examples we're giving in our feedback, but also they still kind of align and sit underneath the 5 principles as well.
So it sounds like those attributes are really helping to guide people with the feedback that they share, because often we find it can be challenging for people to come up with actual feedback.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we first started with feedback, and this was a lesson for us, we had the 3 questions with free text. And some people love that, but some people just didn't know where to start. And we've had a lot of better feedback once we introduced the attributes and just thought-provoking, and just to give them a starting point.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you're living your own principles by getting feedback on the performance process and iterating it off of the feedback there too.
Yep.
Tell me, how do you want people to feel about that feedback experience? Because I know in many organizations, it can be uncomfortable. How do you go about creating the feeling and experience? What is it that you want employees to feel in that process?
I guess what we always talk about when we introduce, even through onboarding, we have a sort of introduction to feedback, and that's not just an intro to how to use Crewmojo, it's also an intro to our approach, because it is a bit different than organizations people might have worked at in the past, where it's a lot more structured and they're ranked and rated in an annual performance review. So it's very different, and it is a bit of a mindset shift. But I think we really want people to feel like they've got ownership of when and how they go about seeking feedback. But I think the main thing we try and sort of drive home, especially early days, but throughout all the feedback training that we do, we've designed Crewmojo and been able to tailor it to our needs. However, we don't want to take away from the fact that it is just the feedback tool, and we want to make sure people are actually having those real-time one-to-one feedback discussions, and that they're equipped to do that, and they can give really skillful feedback that's meaningful, whether that's sitting next to someone and having a chat informally, or whether it's, you know, actually responding to a feedback request in Crewmojo that might be more to do with a specific milestone that individuals decided for themselves. So I think it's just about ownership and not feeling like I have to ask for feedback because I've got my annual review coming up. It's, I actually want this feedback so that I can continue to improve and develop myself and progress my learning or my career. So I think it's really, I think the ownership element is probably where that good feeling comes from, rather than it being like a tick box exercise that you have to do because your employer is telling you to.
I think as well, what you say there is so important. It's not just about the tool, but it's about the conversation. I'm curious, does the conversation, would you say it comes, that the conversation happens and then the feedback gets captured, or is it more that the feedback happens in the tool, which then generates a conversation? Is there a particular pattern that you see there?
I definitely, it can be both, but I think what we, again, really talk about in our training is nothing that's captured in Crewmojo should be a surprise to someone. So, you know, especially if it's constructive feedback, like if you're giving someone constructive feedback, it's probably best to actually have a chat with them first so that they've got, you know, the tone and the context right, and then consolidate that in, or summarize that through your Crewmojo feedback requests. And then that allows them to actually work through the feedback from all of their peers or clients that they've requested it from with their people guide, which is, as Nick said, kind of that careers coach type of role. And they'll actually, that's where the conversation can be really helpful too. It's actually sitting down, working through the feedback. What does this actually mean for you? What do you want to do with the feedback? So there's always stuff you might agree with or need more context on, but it's actually kind of unpacking it and not just reading it and then parking it for another year.
Are there other elements of the experience that you can share, and how the process is made effective, or how you know, people are given the ability to see what they've requested, and other aspects that help make it a smooth process for giving and receiving feedback?
I've got probably one. Nick, you might have some other things that you're thinking of. One thing I think that I found quite novel joining Mantel Group is that it really does align with our communicate directly principle. I find it quite unique that it's very transparent. So if you give someone feedback, it's attributed to you. You're not kind of hiding behind the tool and then, you know, throwing out barbs. You actually have to be able to stand behind the feedback that you're giving someone. And I think that's really good, because it means that we all have that responsibility, not just to give like great feedback to our friends at work, but to also give them constructive feedback. So, you know, you can actually see if people get a bit frustrated if people haven't given them constructive feedback, because they really want that. That's why they're going out of their way to ask for the feedback. So I think for me, it's the element of it being not anonymous, the element of having, you know, like your people guide who can also view the feedback with you and talk it through and make sense of it and make it meaningful for you. And it's not about, okay, my feedback's all in now I have to go into a performance review discussion. It's, okay, now I get to choose what I want to do with my feedback, and how I'm going to use that to shape what's next for me. So it's a lot more sort of individualized. And again, I keep saying ownership, but I think it's quite unique that the individual really is in charge of when they want to get feedback and what they want to do with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think on top of that, just when you're not doing it every 6 months just to get your rating, and then hopefully that increases, that's going to directly influence your pay increase. I think that takes the pressure off. Well, it has to be exceptional because I want my pay increase or I want to get the top rating. I think it then strips it back to, it's about helping me learn and grow. So, for us, taking away the assessment of it really makes it true feedback, and people receive it in that true form. Other things, I think, for us, we're not an easy organisation for a tool to work with the way we do things, because we don't have that assessment. So a lot of the tools we looked at, you look at them straight away and you can see the assessment and the way it's styled just isn't us. And I think if we had a tool that was structured that way, it wouldn't be well received by our team, because it doesn't fit our principles and our style. And we've worked with another tool. We've looked at so many tools. And for us with Crewmojo, being able to tailor it, just simple things. We don't use the word manager. We're a flat hierarchy. So not having the word manager in there, not having the language with assessment, and we talked about performance before. That fits us, and the Crewmojo team have been amazing. Every time we request for a different change or a different way of doing things, it is so meaningful for our people, because their experience with the tool matches our organisation, and that's so important to us. The other thing that is really good is the unsolicited feedback in there as well. So people, it's almost like a trigger for people. It reminds them, hey, I can give this person feedback. Even if they haven't asked, they've done an amazing job. I should let them know, and I should document it in the tool. That's been a recent addition since we joined, teamed with Crewmojo, that has really, or that person, I think that client meeting was great, but they could have just, this will help them if I give them this feedback and they learn from their presentation style or whatever it might be, and just having that unsolicited. So you don't have to give feedback when someone asks at a structured time. You can give it to them in the moment when it's meaningful to them and can help them learn and grow.
Just going back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier about ownership, and I know that's something you've been talking a lot about. I think one of the very nifty ideas that you guys came up with was that allowing people, once they've requested feedback from other team members, that little reminder feature in there, so that the person who's requested feedback still feels like they've got control, and that they can actually see the feedback, who's responded and who hasn't, and to be able to write a little nudge that pushes back out really helps, I think, it seems so small, but it helps to establish this feeling of control and ownership of the process. So it's touches like that you've come up with, I think, that really help build that experience you're trying to create.
For sure. I think too, I don't know about you, Nick, but I know in previous roles where I've been in like a P&C or HR role, it would be up to that person to actually follow up and chase everyone and nag and make sure. And it if it's coming from HR, it seems like a big deal. Whereas if the individual's actually, hey, I've just finished this project, really enjoyed working with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how I performed on this, or, what I could do better next time, or how I led this project. It's coming from them. There's a bit more almost of a commitment from the person. Oh, okay, yep, absolutely. I'll make sure I get time in this week to respond for you, because they're asking on behalf of themselves. Like they're really, what am I trying to say? They've kind of gone out of their way to actually say, hey, I really value what you've got to say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I'm doing.
It's almost like you're flipping it and you're making it so that the person who's requesting for it gets upset if they don't get the feedback.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they genuinely want it, was what I was going to say. They actually do value it, and becomes important to them.
And I know you have a process, maybe tell us a little bit about the process called My Deal. And I know that this somewhat feeds into there. How do these things work? What is My Deal, and how does this feedback process work with that My Deal process?
Yeah, so the My Deal conversation. So everyone has a conversation, and thinking about the year ahead. So every 12 months, they have a conversation with either their CEO or their brand leader and someone in people and culture. And is probably one of our more structured, one of our only sort of really structured parts in the process that we commit to doing it for everyone every 12 months, and it's their 12 months. So a lot of the things we do are individualized and personalized here. That's why we don't have all these structured processes. We're trying to look at the individual. So when you hit every 12 months here, you have that conversation, and the focus of that conversation is to talk about feedback, to talk about how things are going, and it's two-way feedback. So it's how the individual is going, but then also feedback from the individual on how they think the organisation is going. And then we also talk about, I mean, the priority is really the next 12 months. What's important to that individual in the next 12 months? And we don't just look at it from a work lens. If the person is comfortable sharing, we're happy to understand what's important to them. You know, my partner's having a baby, and so family is very important to me in the next 12 months, or some time off, or whatever it might be. Or I'm really focused on developing a certain skill. So wherever that conversation goes, so it's about what's really important to the person. We will talk about remuneration, and we look at that more from a market perspective. We look at remuneration every quarter anyway, and we assess where people are at. And if the market's shifted, we address that rather than these annual cycles and everyone thinking how much they're going to get. It's more around, if the market's shifted, we'll let you know and we'll adjust your salary accordingly. So, but we do address it in that conversation, but it's probably more of a minor part of that conversation. And then we sort of reward people, I suppose, for the longer that they're here. So once we understand what's important to them, we then say, what do you want for your My Deal? And everyone gets something, and we're more generous year on year. So I think once you've been here about 3 years, you get additional leave. But then also we give people something, and people might take extra annual leave to be with their family. They might want to go on a conference overseas, and there's lots of things. We sort of have to give them a blank sheet of paper to a certain extent, and they can select what's important to them. Have I missed anything, Caitlin, on the My Deal?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it all off.
That's amazing. It sounds like you're really tailoring the overall picture or benefits that employees get based on what's really interesting, motivating for them and for their particular time of life. So someone who's younger and might be wanting to put in more hours and accelerate through career can get benefits that way. Whereas, as you just mentioned, people who are more into family because they're older and have children, they're able to then take things that are more meaningful in their life. That's fantastic. Tell me, is it important to have consistency in how the process works across the entire organization? Because I know that you have acquired a lot of different business units, and often we see challenges there because business units come with different cultural norms and different ways of doing things. How's it worked? Is it consistent? What are the challenges there? How have you gone about tackling that?
I think we've actually been quite fortunate in that the tool we were using 12 months ago before we moved to Crewmojo, and that was, you know, at the time, I think 7 brands within Mantel Group, 7 or 8 brands, and we were, they were all pretty much on board with the move because the tool wasn't suiting our needs, the one that we were with previously. So it was quite an easy shift, but there were learnings that we took from that, which we were able to apply now, where we're integrating 2 brands that are on 2 completely different platforms, and they actually like the platforms. So they don't really have an issue with the platforms they're using. So consistency has been a really key part of the messaging as to why it's really important that we have the same approach, the same process. It creates a better experience for the team, for starters, because if we're working on projects across different brands, which is the norm now, it means if you're going to give your colleague feedback, you're potentially using up to 3 different tools if we're not using the same process. So that was obviously a big part of the experience for the team, is getting everyone into one place so you're all using the same process. It also impacts the experience for clients, because we often ask clients or stakeholders that you might be working with internally on the client side for feedback. So for them, if they're getting feedback requests from Mantel Group employees from up to 3 different tools, it's also a bit confusing for them. So I think consistency has really been a key part of our messaging. And it just makes for a more streamlined, and again, keeping it simple, a really simple process that it's not rocket science. It's just a very intuitive, easy workflow. And it means that everyone's having the same experience. Like if we're going into my deals, for example, like we were just discussing, it's all in the same place. All the feedback's in the same location. We've got kind of like one source of truth. It just makes it a lot easier for everyone, I think.
Each of our brands have their own sort of different styles. They do. And some brands were built from bottom up here within Mantel Group. Some brands we've acquired. So that brings a lot of complexity. And things like promotions, you know, again, the brands might do their processes slightly different, but there's a consistent approach around things like we don't promote in cycles. So when the person's ready, either we tap them on the shoulder or they put their hand up and we go through the process, and we keep it simple, quick, so the person's not waiting forever, and we just stick to some of those.
Just something that Caitlin mentioned a few moments ago on getting feedback from clients as well. Is that an element of your process? Because we didn't cover that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our team are out, you know, working on client projects for extended periods of time. It might be a couple of months. It might be, you know, 12 months, 18 months. So they really do become quite embedded and are working really closely with internal stakeholders on the client side. So it was really important to us to find a tool that allowed our team to actually make those requests themselves rather than having to go through someone in ops or people in culture to add a client in. It was quite clunky in our previous tool. So that's been really great. People can pretty seamlessly invite an external responder to give them feedback, whether that's a contractor or someone from a client, or, you know, someone that they've worked with outside of our organization on a project. They're able to get that feedback and have it all centralized in one location, which has been super helpful. And I think that's been really well received from our team as well, because they can own it. They can just ask themselves. They don't have to go jumping through hoops to get a client added to the system.
Awesome.
And I must say, our clients are so comfortable with using it and happy to give feedback as well, which is great.
I think it's a real testimony, to be honest, from the relationships that you must have with your clients, that one, that your people feel comfortable asking for feedback, and two, that your clients are able to freely give that feedback. It's really telling of the relationship that you have there. When you rewind in the whole process back to when we were implementing and going live and working the project out, what's some of the things that worked well for getting the process live? And tell me a little bit about, you know, anything that you could share with others that might be going on that same journey.
I think there's definitely been some learnings for us. I think, as I alluded to earlier, we were quite fortunate in that the tool we had before was not working for us as well as Crewmojo is. So that initial transition, it wasn't actually too tricky. Like we had a plan, we had a comms plan, we timelined everything out and made sure that we kind of kept ourselves accountable to when things had to happen. We worked really closely with our ops team to make sure we were able to capture everyone's feedback history from the previous tool, because that was something our team was really passionate about. They didn't want to lose any of their history, so we were able to make sure that was ready and waiting for them when they first logged into Crewmojo. But I think what worked really well was just we ran a number of brown bag sessions with our team where we took them through live demos, and we did like a live Q&A as well. So I think we had a lot of transparency. People felt they could ask anything they wanted and we would address it on that call. We also made sure we had some FAQs, again, to kind of, it's again that ownership piece. Like, rather than coming to the Crewmojo team or to us with questions, we would always direct people, have you read the FAQs yet? You can actually probably self-troubleshoot, and just trying to continually reinforce that, although it might have been quicker for myself or Nicole or someone else in our Crewmojo team to jump in, just trying to really upskill the team and manage that change process and helping them like go along the journey, I guess. So I think the live demos were great. it allowed us to show the team the functionality, how it enhanced our feedback process. It allowed us to have transparency if they had questions that they wanted to ask about why. And I think it also, allowed us to kind of push the team to upskill and come on the journey by referring them back to that FAQ guide we'd put together and continually added to. The one other thing I think that worked really well initially was we had some more bespoke sessions with our people guide groups in each brand. So it just allowed us to help, that we kind of got them on board so that they became almost like ambassadors for Crewmojo as well. So they were able to support their guidees to maximize their use of the platform, like how to get the most out of your feedback, how to follow people up yourself, like how to use that remind feature, how to use, we've got like a one-on-one or catch-ups tool within Crewmojo as well, which is typically used by people guides and their guidees, where they'll go through the feedback, they'll think what actions they want to take out of it. So I think initially that's what works really well. And probably the key learning that we've now been able to implement is getting those, we've changed the terminology we've used a few times. I think we've said super users or brand ambassadors or power users, but basically getting some people involved early, consulting with them, giving them early access to test out the platform in the test environment so that they're really comfortable with how it works, and then they can help influence their peers and bring them on the journey, and it's not all coming from us. So that's been our learning, and that's worked really well with the two integrations that we're doing at the moment.
Awesome. Some really good hints and tips there. There's one thing that confused me. What's a brown bag session?
I didn't know what that was when I started hearing that. It's sort of like, it's like a lunch and learn type session. I think it's meant to be like you bring your little
right.
tuck shop bag.
That's awesome.
We scheduled, they're just basically a training session, and it was like an optional, we had a few options. So you could drop in, scheduled over different times on different days. You could drop in and have your lunch and watch the demo, and it was quite informal. Drop any questions in the chat box or put your hand up, and we'll talk. We'll have a discussion live on the call. So yeah, that's what that's what a brown bag is.
That's awesome. I love it. I think we might rip that one off. And with you've mentioned people guides a few times. Just to clarify, so I think this is quite a unique thing that you've got at Mantel Group. Just tell us a little bit about the difference between a people guide and a manager for those that might not have heard of this concept before.
Because we don't have the term manager here, we don't use the term manager. And I mean, I like to see the people guide role as more like a career coach, sort of more like guiding or helping someone through their career. So it's not necessarily someone that you work with every day. Sometimes it's not even necessarily someone that's more senior than you. It's finding the right fit, the right person that you feel comfortable and safe with, who is there to talk to, is there to talk to you about your career, who has access to your feedback, is there to help work through your feedback, and sort of just that person that has your back, that person that can help you through and navigate your time in the organisation. So yeah, it's definitely more guiding their career than any type of management role. So there's no judgment. When we talked earlier about like, we don't assess. It aligns to that. It's not about assessment. It's just helping someone, a different point of view, helping them digest their feedback, think about what they're going to do about it.
Awesome. Love it. It sounds like your own personal coach to help you get through hurdles and grow you, really, rather than manage you, by the sounds of it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's important in our business as well, because we don't have a million policies like so many businesses do. The people guide helps you, like if you're new in the organization, maybe you've been here like 12 months and you want to go for a promotion, they know what the process is, so they kind of guide you through it. They're not, I guess the difference with a manager is they're not making the decision on whether or not you're promoted. They're not making any decision around your salary or anything like that. They're purely just taking you through the process and asking those kind of coaching questions to try and make sure you've considered everything. And that might be to do with your feedback, or it might be to do with other processes like promotion, for example, where, you're kind of doing a bit of a self-assessment and looking at what gaps you might be looking to address in order to go for that.
What sort of background do these people guides have? Are they HR or are they from the business?
They're from the business.
From
So
the-
it's like consultants. Like we've got some, engineers, all different walks of life, but it's basically people who have a genuine interest and care in wanting to engage on that level with their colleagues. People that know the business really well and live and breathe our principles. That's really important, because they've got to also be a good role model, I guess, of what it is to work at Mantel Group. And so really it's anyone. Like sometimes people come to us and they say, I'm really keen to become a people guide. What do I need to do? And we take them through the training and we add them to, their people guide team within their brand. And sometimes we tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, have you ever thought about being a people guide? Because you're smashing it. You're really living and breathing the principles. And so it can kind of happen in two ways.
That's awesome. With the process and the feedback experience you've created, how do you bring, I know you said that it's aimed at self-ownership, but how do you bring accountability or get buy-in to that process? How do you know that it's working?
It's a good question. I guess one thing that I know my team looks at is like a good guide, if it's working, is are our team actually giving feedback? Because aside from the individual owning their own feedback process, everyone in the business has a responsibility, to give feedback that's meaningful, not just, yep, great job, like working with you. It needs to be meaningful. So I think that's kind of a bit of a guide for us. If we're looking at feedback and we can see that there's nothing written consistently for everyone in the what could I do more of question, that might indicate to us that, okay, we might actually need to do some more training with this group, because maybe they're struggling with the constructive feedback side, or maybe they're not feeling I don't know, maybe something's not working for them and we need to kind of surface it. So I think one way we go about checking in regularly is we have monthly people guide meetings in each of the brands, and that's a forum for them to surface any issues that they're encountering, maybe through discussions with their guidees, and that might be typically through feedback processes. And then I guess it allows us to jump on any issues if we feel like there's a training gap, or a particular person might need some more coaching or support in how to actually give feedback to different colleagues. I don't know, Nick, is there anything else you think in terms of how we actually, see that it's working?
No, I agree. We try and just look at the quality. I mean, participation, sure. But yeah, it's more around, our CEOs, they're really involved in their people and their brand and understanding how they can help their people. So they're checking in with the people guides and understanding what the feedback is and how people are going. So we have a high level of trust here. So, we trust people to do it and do it well. We do training. Yeah, they're probably the main things.
I really like how you've, as an organization, focused on one specific process or experience and doing that incredibly well, rather than, because the temptation can be to implement many, there's all sorts of different levers that we can implement, and to have that level of focus, I think is clearly paying dividends, because you've been on number one of top places to work, and not only once, but a number of times in a row. So that's clearly coming through as a great result. Are there any challenges that you can think of that you've faced in setting up this process or having that focus that would help others to be aware of if they were embarking on a similar journey?
I mean, I think when we set it up, we put so much effort into it. So, the training, we spent a lot more time with the people guides in the earlier days, really supporting them, understanding what's important. We take feedback all the time as well. So people feel very comfortable, with that, communicate directly to tell us if things aren't working, or they're, oh, you've changed the promotion process. No, it's too structured, or whatever it might be. So I think when you build something that puts a lot of trust on the individuals, you have to invest a lot of time in helping guide them, coach them, make sure they really understand the benefit. And, then you have more advocates who then advocate to others, and then it builds that way. So I think any advice I'd give anyone is don't underestimate the amount of time, effort, and the leaders have to buy in. So we don't really like the term leadership team, that leadership teams here. So we have a strategy and execution team, and they truly believe it. And so everyone's talking the same sort of language, which makes a big difference as well.
I think, again, trying to remember right back to the beginning, I think you also took a very user-centered or an employee-centered approach. When we saw some of the initial requirements coming through from you, it was very much about user stories about their experience. I'm guessing that you put in quite a bit of effort to understand that experience that you wanted to bring to life.
Yeah, and I think so with our previous tool, and I was probably the person that was my thing and my role implementing that tool, and I knew every little piece of annoying, like everything that annoyed everyone with that tool. So everyone's quite open here. They're happy to say, I don't like that. That doesn't make sense. And we work with developers, right? So they're looking at tools going, oh my gosh, I could create this better. So, when you asked us a question earlier about how did we want them to feel, we want it to be easy and, want them to feel comfortable and safe. And so, yeah, we certainly were thinking, if I was the end user, how would this make me feel? Well, even just the look of it, to press that button, does that make sense? Where's that? Where's our logo? All that stuff. So, yeah, absolutely. And our team are very good at sharing how they feel and what works for them and what's going to motivate them. A tool that they think is silly in the way it navigates, or it uses language that we don't use, it will disengage our team. We know that.
It's certainly been, from our side, a very collaborative experience as well, because we've also learned, having that feedback, because people often don't take the time to raise what might be a nuance or a small detail, and they just get on with it. But having that come through from your team has certainly helped us to improve as well. So it's something we're very grateful for in the relationship that we have. So I guess where to from here? Like, how do you ensure that the process stays relevant to your people and the organization goals and the strategy that you're looking to achieve?
I think your point, Mark, actually encapsulates this quite well. Something that has been so beneficial for us throughout this journey has been not only getting regular feedback from our team. So like when we first implemented it, we didn't get it 100% right. There was a lot of stuff that we didn't think of, or we missed, or we didn't ask, and we just assumed. And I think that's always going to happen. But having a lot of forums for the team to share their feedback and then actually see that it's being taken on board and actioned, and that's through our regular syncs and catch-ups with Crewmojo, which we do fortnightly. I think that's been so impactful because we've been able to action or respond to every single piece of feedback we've received from the team. And there's been a lot. Like, we've received pages of feedback. But it's really, I think it's been a great story for us because we've been able to continuously make things better. We've kept that communication line open with the team. And that's allowed us to ensure that the tool is working. The team's bought into it and they're using it and they feel that they've been brought on the journey and that they're also part of making it better. So that's been so impactful for us. And I think it's been really critical to Crewmojo being a success for us at Mantel Group.
And, you know we're annoying. We know we can be annoying, and we've asked for a lot. And, you know, thanks to you and your team, Mark, because genuinely, we've asked a lot. We know that.
I wouldn't describe it as annoying. I think it's just candid, and it's great to have these conversations. Really, it's, again, it comes back to the culture that we've just been talking about, is sharing feedback. We're equally open to that feedback, and we know that there's always improvements that we can make. So being able to direct our efforts into places we know can make an impact is really, it's actually very useful for us. So it works well. Yeah, we know it comes with best intention. That's awesome. I think really just to wrap up, I would say what a fantastic culture that Mantel Group has managed to build and continues to build, with a focus on feedback, not going too broad and overwhelming your team members with too much stuff to do, allowing them to integrate it into the flow of work and continuously improve that process. I'd like to thank you both for coming on and sharing candidly and openly about some of the internal workings of the group. I'm sure that there'll be lots of learnings and hints and tips that people can take from the conversation we've had today.